That's right. I mean, there was a huge outpouring of anti-war dissent in the United States and all over the world. On February 15th, 2003, between 15 and 30 million people took to the streets before the war even started to beg Bush and Blair not to invade. And, nation states were very skeptical of the war as well. They doubted America's claims of WMD in Iraq and saw the invasion as a war of choice that was using terrorism and 9/11 as a pretext. That said, there wasn't the kind of international effort to constrain United States behavior through coercion, be it economic or forms of cultural sanction. And I think the general attitude is that there really is no way to constrain American power. And countries like Germany and France, while disapproving of the war, didn't want to do anything to fundamentally jeopardize their alliance with the United States. They're too interdependent culturally, economically, geopolitically. So there was, at some level, rhetorical censure, but no real effort of the international community to blunt American conduct. And I think the attitude of much of the world is we'll sit this conflict out and watch America come to grief if that's indeed, the trajectory of the war, and then try to rebuild a sense of alliance, once America removes itself from the quagmire.
You referenced WMD, and for our viewers who might not be familiar, weapons of mass destruction. We know that at the time, Colin Powell had said to the UN Security Council that there was belief based on intelligence that it was presented that there were weapons of mass destruction to be found, and nearly all the intelligence was found to be false in terms of leading up to that invasion led by the United States. I do want to touch on what you said there, that, there were many countries that maybe, as you said, decided they were going to sit this one out. What does that say about how differently countries can act?
I mean, first, I think it speaks to a longstanding contradiction of American power. During the Cold War, the United States was generally very good at rallying in defense of Western European democracy, and it championed the freedom of the peoples of Eastern Europe behind the Iron Curtain, and yet would deny basic rights of self-determination to peoples in the so-called Third World, and visit death and destruction on people in Vietnam and Latin America and other parts of the world. And I think the globe has lived with this American contradiction for decades, where it can be both a good and bad actor on the global stage. What's remarkable is how quickly America reclaimed the mantle of democratic leadership in the global community, having violated democratic values in Iraq, and to some extent Afghanistan as well. So the general attitude of the world was to forgive and forget and sort of settle back into this comfortable sense that America remains the leader of the free world. And then to bring it, to today's conflict, I think a lot of Americans have a natural sense of affinity with the peoples of Western Europe. They're white by and large, they're Christian, they're considered part of the same family of nations, and the same degree of concern and sympathy is generally not extended to brown and black peoples of the developing world, whose politics and values are seen as somehow inscrutable or sufficiently other to function as a barrier for strong forms of sympathy and solidarity. And my hope is that from this terrible conflict, the United States and other countries reckon with this double standard and think about how to apply its universal values more universally and extend sympathies and support to all victims of war, displacement, and conflict.